Come on in, Clark County. It's Rob Anderson with Reform Clark County. Come in out of the smoke haze. Democrats are burning down the forest, but come on in into the fresh air of Reformcast Studio as we this week take a look at the election results, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Also, maybe you missed it, but Dr. Melnick, our version of Dr. Fauci at the local level, announced that he's retiring. So we'll take a look at his illustrious career. But before we do, hit the like button, the share, engage, be informed, and help others to do that as well by sharing this show. Or you can support it by going to givesendgo.com, put in Reform Clark County, and support not only this show, but support Reform Clark County, my efforts, legal efforts sometimes, and also getting the word out to others. So let's talk about the election that just happened August 4th. The results are still coming in. By the time you watch this show, most of the results will come in. At this point of the recording, we're still waiting for about 22,000 ballots. So if something has changed, maybe I'll kind of tag in an audio update, so keep an eye out for that. But as of right now, just a few days after Election Day, as I look at the election results, I see good, I see not so good, but I'll call it bad to fit in with the theme, and I see ugly. So I really kind of debated, did I want to sugarcoat? Did I want to just kind of put the happy dance and try to give the rah-rah spin? No, I don't want to do that. So today I'm going to be breaking down some of the election results, and let's just start off with maybe a little bit of context that, in this sense, we're looking at about 38 to 39% voter participation rate overall. Now, I looked back 4 years ago, it was 43%. In 2018, it was 36%, even a little bit worse. So, we're about on par. There's many factors that go into elections and voter participation. One of those issues is our ballot here in Clark County just wasn't super compelling. Now, there was 2, 3, 4 maybe races that had some real outcomes at stake, had some significant primaries, but for the most part, it just wasn't as compelling. Now, that's going to change as we go into November. Now, all the races, mostly unless they're not, unless they don't have an opponent, they're going to be all compelling. So that's going to be a little bit better for sure. But from the big change from election night, so when election night results dropped, John Braun was just a little bit behind Marie Perez, and then Eileen Quering O'Brien was just a little bit behind Mitchell Kelly. In 24 hours, really the only changes that we've seen is that John Braun has pulled ahead at this point. Another maybe 15,000 votes will drop today, but maybe that might change. But I would think that he's going to stay ahead. Also, Eileen Quering O'Brien, I would expect her to still kind of stay ahead. But if there's any changes, I will jump in and give an audio update on that. But election night, really shapes, when we're talking about primary, it really shapes what you're going to see in November, obviously. But a lot of times we like to just kind of wait, and then what we see in November, we grumble. But right now in primary, that's when it was really decided. So that's why it's so important you vote, that you can't, even if you open up your ballot and you're like, man, there's just not a lot going on here. And I'm going to go into a charter amendment at a future show that's going to actually, I think, have make it worse. It's gonna actually take away more options for you or selections, which is going to make your ballot less compelling. And I think it's going to lower voter participation even more. But as we kind of digest everything that's happened and is happening in these election results, I see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I want to go over those things with you. First of all, the good is we saw in our county races in District 1, we saw that Brian Scholl, a newcomer to politics, I'm a little surprised in the sense of typically you will see a Democrat, you'll see a Republican type, but the way that it stands right now, it looks like Glenn Young will be facing Brian Scholl, and Dusty Arab, very we used to use the word progressive, but they're really not progressive anymore. They are neo-Marxist socialist candidates. Dusty Arab's one of those. She tried to get the endorsement from the DSA. I think that there was more kind of infighting or something that kind of prevented that. And Lucas Bardou, who was a kind of a up and coming of more of what would be considered the establishment Democrats. And they got shellacked. Dusty Arab, pretty compelling though. At this point, 25%. Brian Scholl, 28%. Glenn Young, 35%. Again, things could tighten up, but I think that those two will hold. Glenn and Brian will move forward. District 2, Michelle Belcott, I would say the performer of the night in the sense of, these types of races. Obviously, Peter Van Nortwick got 70% of the vote and, cleaned up. I don't think that there's any real issue or concern there. But Michelle Belcott got 50%. And John Zingale, 36%, knocked out Martin Pitoni, and so at 13%. So it's very interesting that you see some establishment. So Lucas Bardot, Martin Pitoni, and even, let's say, Mike Pond, and I think there was another couple Ty Stober, and then Sharon Wiley. These are all would be considered more of your OG establishment Democrat type candidates. They were backed by that type of regime, not the more radical DSA kind of side of the Democrat socialists, and they all got beat. So the good is that most of the Republican candidates on the county side did fairly well, and moving forward to the general election, Scott Weber did pretty good, 53%. That's strong, and he was endorsed. Eileen obviously has come out on top, and will most likely be facing Mitchell Kelly, which is interesting that a no-name kind of bean counter. I guess he took offense to that, but I don't mean it in a super mean way or anything like that. It's just something accountants were called, but it just kind of came out of nowhere. And there's no doubt that he's having help and being mentored and guided by Greg Kimsey, and is Greg Kimsey's pick. I just wonder how Sharon Wiley and Ty Stober feel about that, because I have a feeling maybe they were meant to think that Kimsey wanted them to win when really his pick is Mitchell Kelly, and I think that will probably come out clear in the coming months. Maybe even, who knows, maybe Kimsey would even be willing to step aside and appoint Mitchell Kelly as the new auditor to skew elections. I wouldn't put it past him if he did something like that. But anyway, so the good of the night was these county races. Most of the Republicans did really well. The only one that I think underperformed would be Peter Silliman up in District 5. So Troy McCoy, 51%, Peter Silliman at 48 as of now. That might tighten, but that was, even some other projection sites were expecting Peter Silliman. That would be flip-flop, that he would be maybe 51, 52%, and Troy McCoy 48%. And so that's the only asterisk of the good. Let's move to the bad, and it's really not bad. It's just not good. So I'm calling it bad to fit in this. But this is the Braun and Perez So let's talk about the bad. And the bad isn't bad. It's just not good. So I'm calling it bad because it fits into the theme of good, bad, and the ugly. But it's Braun versus Perez. And the bad is that I just don't think that those results are as strong as what John Braun needed. There he's neck and neck. He's a little bit on top. So he's in the race here. He's got a good campaign, good staff, but it's one of those things that you just want to see a little bit stronger results because let's be honest, Perez, even though Heinrich is not supporting her, saying that now, I believe he's just posturing and is trying to work out something. I have a hard time believing that he's just going to hold out and not get behind Perez at some moment, but maybe not. And, maybe half of his voters become disenchanted and say, nope, not going to do it. Marie Perez is, the worst candidate ever. We're not going to do it. It's possible. But that still leaves, another 7% on the table. And so I could just give you rah-rah that it looks great, but my point here in saying this is that you can't sit back. Voters cannot sit back and go, oh, John Braun, he looks pretty good. He's pretty, I went to the Mike Johnson event today and was talking about what a great resume and all that, and it's true. But you can't just rest on that. You can't just sit there and hope that that's going to take place. You have to be engaged. You have to vote. You have to do more than vote. You have to get in there and knock on doors, volunteer, make donations. I mean, you can't just sit back and hope that this is going to be all right. Now, granted, he's got RNC who's behind him and it's going to be very competitive, but there's less than 90 days here. And as I look at those results, I would want to see more percentage points there. I would want to see Braun with a 5% or 6% lead over Perez right now, since she has she had a challenger, so who drew 14%. So those votes are going to go somewhere, and so I would have liked to have seen a bigger. And I'm sure if they were, there's some people who probably agree with me, maybe some don't. But so let's move to the ugly, and it is ugly, my friends. Again, I'd love to be able to put on the cheerleader outfit and give you a rah-rah and sugarcoat this, but as I look at the analysis for the state positions, state representatives, it's not good at this point for Republicans. It's a little more troubling. Republicans, did pretty well, like I said, in the county primaries. No big surprises. Maybe the biggest was Brian Schull, just kind of newcomer and, doing so well, but did maybe better than some expected. But the state candidate races, besides 20th LD, those are solid. Those are safe. Ed Orcott, Peter Abarno look like they're doing great. But John Lee, Stephanie McClintock, Dave Stevie, Kevin Waters, all of those have serious headwinds in their races. I mean, they are down ranging from 5 to 10%. And the closest one, Stephanie McClintock, is neck and neck. And but and some might go, well, maybe it's a candidate, comparison. Well, okay, let's talk about that. Kevin and Dave Stevie are considered more moderate. John Lee's obviously strong conservative. John Lee actually outperformed Stevie and Kevin Waters. So I don't think it's a candidate issue. I mean, that doesn't make sense. It's an issue of campaigning for sure. How hard are those campaigns? And then also, the people's support in getting your message out and getting that message to the people in energizing voters. Again, I've mentioned that indivisible which is, really motivated deep down by hate for Trump, hate for ICE. It's just, using that hatred in order to energize their base. It's just a get out the vote effort. This happened right after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. They had their big No Kings event, and it juiced up the voters. It juiced up the get out the vote. That's all it was. It was so successful that they just continued it, and they are continuing it every week. Every day, pretty much, they have events. They are churning and keeping their base motivated. And I'm not seeing that on the Republican side. I'm not seeing it. And I've been kind of trying to raise the alarm. I've been talking to party leaders. I've tried to say, hey, this is a real problem. And I think that these results kind of show it, that I'm not wrong, that we very well could be looking at losing some state races if we don't get engaged. Now that's the beauty of primaries in these kind of situations. It can be a wake-up call. It can be a real clarifying moment for candidates, for campaigns, for people that support those candidates. And right now, if you support John Lee, Stephanie McClintock, Dave Stevie, Kevin Waters, if you want Republican representatives in representing you in Southwest Washington, if you don't want more tax increases, if you don't want the spending to continue on and on and on, you need to wake up right now. You need to get involved with these campaigns with John Lee, Stephanie McClintock, Dave Stevie, Kevin Waters. You need to jump in right now. Don't wait for, maybe in October I might help, or November I might help. No, right now, because right now, November is shaped now. November general elections are shaped right now. So you have to get involved. All right, so that's the ugly. I should have thrown in on the good side that Republican-backed Supreme Court justices, I believe all of them are advancing. That's very good. So, we have our work cut out for us. It's not all bad. It's not all good. It's not all ugly. But there's a little of each on that. And my point and my message is, don't sit back. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Because the other side, the left, indivisible, all of that, the Democrats probably have to be pretty happy with these results. I mean, not necessarily on the county side, because most of the OG, old school backed Democrat candidates, all of them lost. So, the DSA movement, the neo-Marxist, communist, socialist, whatever you want to label it, movement in the Democrat Party that we're seeing taking over the Democrat Party nationwide is happening right here locally, and we're seeing those effects. And but Republicans, conservatives, good common sense people who just, don't want to be taxed to death, who don't want to, have all of these kind of things forced down our throats all the time and our liberties, taken away. You've got to get involved. You've got to vote. And the biggest culprit, so to speak, the biggest group that's just non-existent are Christians, are the church. And that's why, by the way, what's happening in Battleground with the whole Christian nationalism is terrible, and smearing and trying to, all that's happening is the left knows that if the Christians in the churches wake up and really get engaged, it's going to be game over. Their political power will shrink away, and they know that. And so they're doing this propaganda campaign. They're coming at heavy. They're trying to smear you and guilt you and make you think that just because you're a Christian, you can't be involved in politics. You can't be engaged in the system. And that's just, it's a lie. It's from the pit of hell, that lie. And maybe some show I'll spend more time kind of showing how biblically and how important it is for Christians to be engaged. But So we have like less than 90 days. So don't wait until, mid-October or late October or early November. Don't wait for that because it'll be too late. You have to be engaged right now. You have to volunteer. You have to donate. You have to get involved. Get behind these candidates. If you want to see the kind of changes that we want to see, it's going to take hard work. It's going to take rolling up our sleeves and getting the work done. If you want to see good things happen in November. So recently, the nation was kind of taken captive by a hearing of Dr. Fauci. Well, some of the nation was that covered it and was interested. But Dr. Fauci, who has a blanket pardon from Joe Biden that covers almost a decade, decided to invoke Fifth Amendment privileges that he does not have in order to not answer questions about the pandemic. And that was captivating, but maybe you missed it because of that drama that are and I very rarely talk about national issues, but there's a local connection, and that is that our very own Dr. Melnick, kind of our Dr. Fauci representative, so to speak, announced that he is retiring from the Clark County Public Health Department late August. Now, again, I normally don't get into these kind of things, but I want to segue and look at Dr. Melnick's career because, in a way, there was extension. So Dr. Fauci influenced ones like Governor Inslee and all the other governors. Governor Inslee obviously influenced ones like Dr. Melnick that carried out the policies that we saw in the pandemic. In 2020, it was the inconsistencies, the downright gaslighting and manipulation that was coming out of the Clark County Public Health Department that really activated me politically. Now, up until 2020, I had stayed away from politics. I was under the false notion, false narrative that politics and faith should not be together. That's a lie. It was something that I really had to kind of shake off and come to my own grips. And it was really through examining what was happening at the Clark County Public Health Department that it politically activated me. It opened my eyes to the corruption, to really the spiritual element in darkness and manipulation that was going on from these institutions, from people in power, these authorities. So now Dr. Fauci, is under the scrutiny, right? We saw that, the questionings, the 111 invoke of the Fifth Amendment. But Dr. Melnick, is probably not going to see that scrutiny. He's going to skate off into retirement with a big golden parachute provided by Clark County taxpayers because he made $250,000 a year, roughly, each year. And who knows, what else from endeavors that he had going, because there's really no disclosure for health directors or people who aren't elected like that. So we have no idea. Politicians, people are running for office, they have to file financials. We don't know. So I thought it would be fitting to look back at Dr. Melnick's reign of leadership, shall I say, where he really, I believe, unleashed more deaths, more destruction of this COVID pandemic. So let's start with in the early days. And I just kind of look back at all the letter to the editors and how I kind of got activated. And the first thing that we saw right away was the inflated numbers, COVID death numbers. And what they were doing, and I helped reveal this, many others did too. I don't have a corner on this market, but when it came to Clark County, what was happening here, it was happening statewide, and that is that they were inflating their COVID death numbers. So if you died and you happened to be on the COVID list, they called you a COVID death. Now, maybe you didn't die of anything that had to do with COVID, but you were, in fact, there were suicides, there were car accidents, there were homicides. There were numbers because they just simply, in order to, inflate those numbers, if you died and you had COVID or were on the list of having COVID, you're a COVID death. In fact, if George Floyd would have died in Clark County, they would have marked him as a COVID death because he had COVID apparently in his autopsy when he died. And they were inflating this. In fact, that's how politically got motivated and started, because we were calling attention to Dr. Melnick and in the fact that they were inflating these numbers. They were inflating their hospitalization. So the same thing was happening, where if you got hospitalized and you happened to also have COVID, you were COVID hospitalization. Now, a lot of people, once they saw those stats, were thinking, oh, these are people who are hospitalized because of COVID. And that wasn't it. That was some, but that was not really accurate. And so it was inflating those numbers. Dr. Melnick helped with that. The second big thing that happened was the nursing home policy. So on March 24, 2020, a health advisory was, now Dr. Melnick said that he was just passing along. So he really had nothing to do with this. But as a moral and a professional duty, he had a duty to take a look at long-term care facilities, aka nursing homes in Clark County, and say, hey, are they properly staffed? Are they properly supplied? Are they properly trained? Can they handle this March 24th, 2020 health advisory that pushed COVID people, that had an exception of saying that nursing homes had to accept patients even if they had a pending COVID test result. Now, back in those days, COVID tests, it took you like a couple of weeks to get results. And you could only get tested if you had symptoms. So just imagine people who very likely had COVID were pushed off into long-term care nursing homes, and it resulted in 81 deaths. He didn't notify the Board of Health the next day when there was a Board of Health meeting, March 25th, 2020. Didn't notify them that this significant advisory had gone out, and never did an adequate readiness assessment, which later on public records we could see that nursing homes across the state were panicked and not prepared, and were, letting the state know. So I exposed that. I also exposed that Dr. Melnick covered up one of the biggest outbreaks. So anytime there was any kind of an outbreak, I know that there was a food processing one, they made a big deal about that. But when the vaccinations started rolling out, things got a little quiet on that front, and there was a nursing home outbreak that was one of the biggest outbreaks in Clark County, and it was covered up. It was silenced. There wasn't anything. Why? Because vaccinations were rolling out, and 90% of those that were impacted were vaccinated. And so, they didn't want that to be told. They didn't want that to be out, because that was going against the narrative that vaccinations would stop transmission, would protect you. And so they kept that quiet. I helped expose that through public records release. The following year, then they rolled out the I Got the Shot campaign, where they, and this was the Clark County Public Health, Dr. Melnick's, this was their little campaign where they spread the propaganda that if you got the shot, you would protect others. So you not only protect yourself, but you would protect others, when later on we would see, and really the results show, they could try to say, oh, well, it was effective for the early rounds or whatever. There was no real significant information that showed that they would stop transmission, and they knew it, but yet they promoted the I got the shot campaign and were reckless. And sure enough, months later, guess what? We saw one of the largest deadly waves of COVID deaths. Why? Maybe because people thought, oh, I'm vaccinated. I won't transmit it. I won't, I'm protected. Others are protected. And we saw some of the most deadly waves that followed. So I have no doubt that the I got the shot campaign that put out this false information, misleading information, had deadly results in Clark County. It didn't stop there. It wasn't enough that Dr. Melnick wanted to, manipulate adults with vaccinations. He wanted to get kids and adolescents. And so the Clark County Public Health started working with schools, Richfield School in particular, putting together a vax clinic that was in my neighborhood, and decided to use, peer pressure. So they got the ASB of the students to organize a vax clinic. Now, come on, students, no offense, but students, have enough on their plate, to organize a school dance. And you're telling me it was organic and students organized a vax clinic? That's what we were being told. And the truth is that Clark County Public Health was using, ASB, was using cool kids, was using teachers to try to organize and peer pressure people, adolescents, to get the vax and get the shot. Now, maybe, some parents would object, but Dr. Melnick had a plan. And that was the mature minor doctrine. And he was pretty open about it and that is where 13-year-old or older kids could get the shot without their parents knowing or approval through the mature minor doctrine. Now, there's only one big requirement to qualify for the mature minor doctrine exception, and that is documentation. So there's a decision tree of questions that have to be asked, have to be documented in order to then go around parents. So I put in a public records request saying, so how many adolescents, how many people were vaccinated under the mature minor doctrine? And guess what I found out? I found out that they didn't know. So it took them 2 months. In fact, I see this in the public records that I received, that for 2 months they didn't have an answer. And what they found out is they didn't have the documentation process set up. And so they had to reverse engineer to figure out how many mature minor vaccinations took place, and I still couldn't really get a clear picture. They came up with some garbage number of like 18 total, that they wanted us to think that only 18 were that took place, but I don't believe it. I believe that they just outsourced it to then vendors, which then wouldn't have the scrutiny of having to release public records. But that was very troubling, that the one requirement in order to give kids vaccinations without their parents' consent required documentation, and when the truth came out, they didn't have it. They didn't have the protocol set up. They didn't have the documentation. So another thing is that Dr. Melnick closed down the wrestling sports in Clark County. Didn't close down volleyball, didn't close down basketball, high school basketball, just the wrestling. Why? Because wrestling tournaments, Jay Inslee was not happy with parents feeling like they weren't complying with the masking and all the 6-foot rules and all the things that we know now were just made up and didn't have true science behind them. They didn't like that the parents weren't cooperating, so they decided to punish the kids in order to get the parents in line. So that's what they did. They shut down wrestling in between the holiday break, not any other sports, but just wrestling. Jay Inslee created the biggest youth mental health crisis, issued a declaration. That was probably one of the best things he did during the pandemic, was issued an emergency declaration for mental health crisis of youth, which forced the teachers' unions to reopen the schools because they still didn't want to reopen the schools. And so, to his credit, Jay Inslee forced that. But guess who was right there in the mix? Dr. Melnick was there meeting with the superintendents and facilitating the fear and the lockdowns that kept schools closed because he said he met with superintendents each week. And there's no doubt that he was giving them the fear porn of the pandemic. So, as a result of all of this, I created the Declaration of Independence from COVID Tyranny and Discrimination. And a mini initiative came out of that. 100 people signed that, and then thousands, like 4,000 people signed the declaration. And, unfortunately, the county council ignored the electronic initiative. So we went to a mini initiative, an actual paper initiative. And as you know, we collected 11,550 or 505 signatures in like less than 2 months. And Reform Clark County was born. It was all born out of this pushback on Clark County Public Health and Dr. Melnick. So as he fades off into retirement, I felt like it was good to maybe just kind of reflect back because I doubt, unfortunately, that Dr. Melnick is going to face too much accountability as he fades off into the sunset. How much money did Dr. Melnick make on top of his $250,000 salary? How he was health director for not only Clark County but several other counties at the time. He was a pivotal player in the pandemic, and he's going to ride off. But I know that Dr. Melnick will not escape justice forever. He has blood on his hands, and God will hold him account. And so I hope that he gets right with God. I hope that I do know that accountability, that justice will come forward now, especially as we have a better understanding of all of how that was politicized, how the gaslighting, how the manipulation really took place, and Dr. Melnick played such a key part. So one final thing is I happened to attend the Speaker Johnson. Mike Johnson was in town for a John Braun campaign event in downtown Vancouver, and it was great to see a lot of different people there. And it's just a good reminder, we got to roll up our sleeves. We can't sit back. It's just a couple of days after the election and boom, Speaker Mike Johnson's here, and it's time to get involved. Don't wait until November. Don't wait until October. Jump in right now, get behind candidates, help support them, make donations, volunteer, and start telling other people about it. Help make their case to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family, to your churches. In fact, Mike Johnson mentioned that fact of Christians and how there is a spiritual element to all of this, and we cannot sit back and hand it over to the Marxists, to the atheists, to those that want to eliminate God from the conversation. We have a biblical obligation to get involved, to steward our country and what God has given us through the United States of America, this constitutional republic. So it's important that you be engaged and do it today. So that's Reformcast this week. Hit the like button, the share, get the word out. It's so important that people stay informed of what's happening in our backyard in Clark County. So that's what this show is about. So if you can, hit the like button and share and be a multiplier. Or you can also support the show. Go to givesendgo.com. Put in Reform Clark County, and you can make a reoccurring or a one-time donation and help with my efforts, help with Reform Clark County's efforts, and help get this show out even more. Because, my friends, With God's help, you are the catalyst to reform. See you next time.